ready?
I guess you're ready.
Okay. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Annual meet, the regular meeting, December meeting of the Select Board. Additions to the agenda seem to be David Brown. I can't imagine how you got moved up to such a distinguished. You have the floor.
I have the floor.
Yeah.
So David wants to be considered for the alternate position,
Right.
or just, I guess, the prime position, probably, so to speak.
Well, we have George and we have Bob and me. We're all associated with EC Fiber at one point or another. Right now, George is the primary delegate. Is that right, George?
That's right.
You haven't officially resigned yet. And Bob is, he's been the alternate, the delegate from Pomfret for the last 10 or 20 years, something like that. And I've recently become eligible to be on the EC Fiber governing board, and I would like to take the position of delegate, if that's something you're interested in having.
Yeah. So then would Bob be the alternate?
He might want to be the delegate too. I'm not going to speak for him.
Okay.
So it would be up to you.
Gotcha.
Let's let him talk about that.
Well, you both talk to us.
Okay?
Well, so
Bob, what's your desire?
I would actually prefer to be an alternate.
What happened to
Okay.
Dan Orchard?
He's an alternate also, unlimited alternate.
Thank you. George Sadowski. I'm the delegate to the EC Fiber right now from Woodstock. And my understanding is we're only talking about adding an additional alternate delegate at this meeting.
And George,
Because you have not resigned yet, correct?
I have not resigned.
Okay.
are you going to resign?
Well, yes. I will be moving next year. That's correct, and I'll be moving out of the area.
So until then, can we appoint you both as alternates so that we're ready?
I'm not sure that's necessary. I mean, we have plenty of alternates. These guys do a good job. George does a good job. I'm only trying to cover from if and when George decides to resign. I would like to take his place, but until he has a position, I'm not trying to usurp his position.
And do you want to be an alternate in the meantime or not?
No, because there are other two alternates who are perfectly capable.
So we
Wait a minute, other two alternates?
Yes,
Yeah.
there
all
will
right.
be.
Yeah.
There's a vacancy in Dan.
Right.
Okay.
So we don't need to make a decision about
I don't think so. I just
Now, not
want,
regarding David, but Bob is here and would like to be appointed alternate.
yeah, that's a different matter.
Okay.
So you need a motion to appoint Bob as alternate to the EC Fiber Board?
I'll second. Motion's been made and seconded to appoint Bob as an alternate on the EC Fiber Board. Any further discussion? No discussion? You ready for a vote? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it.
Thank you.
Boy, that was...
That.
Good interview. That was some interview.
Yeah.
Good
You're going to make a lot of money, Bob.
Yeah.
Just like you.
We do really good.
Okay, the next thing on the agenda is the Economic Development Commission.
Hi.
Hey.
Should I come up here?
Here.
Anywhere you like.
Great. To you.
Hi. Julia Cook. Know all of you. There are 5 items that we need select board action on at this meeting. The first is a carryover from our November meeting to December. We had decided to hold off on a formal vote of whether or not we thought we wanted to approve the Woodstock Christian Childcare Grant application. We wanted to really craft we wanted to wordsmith the offer of a grant to make it clear that EDC funds would not be used for religious purposes or materials. So we did wordsmith the terminology of the grant offer. And with that, we're recommending offering a grant to Woodstock Christian Childcare in order to extend their program to infants and offer space for a number of infants starting in September, which is really exciting.
And did everyone on your board agree?
Yep.
Excuse me?
Did everyone on the commission agree?
I'm happy to read that, the phrasing that we settled on.
Would you please?
Sure, yeah. Per EDC granting guidelines, which exclude, quote, fraternal or religious groups with proposals that promote an individual doctrine, end quote, grant funds will be used only for the purchase of non-religious materials in support of the infant care program or labor to support the infrastructure therein. None of the funds shall be used to promote religion, worship, or its instruction. We thought that was sufficient to protect the town from any legal action and also to support a really worthy program.
And did you have it read by a lawyer?
We did not have that terminology read by a lawyer. We had, I had consulted with 3 different lawyers prior to that, and they all felt like terminology along those lines would be good. So I felt relatively confident.
So I'd propose a motion to accept or to give this grant to the
In the amount of $5,000.
To the Woodstock Christian Childcare in the amount of $5,000.
I hear a second. Motion's been made.
I'll second that.
Motion's been made and seconded to appropriate up to $5,000 for the Christian Child Care Fund program. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it.
Second item is a contract extension for Du Bois and King, which is...
Done that one.
Oh, you've done that one?
We did that. We had a morning meeting. We did it in that meeting.
Great, done.
I'd like to, could you just, for the audience?
Yeah, sure, yes. The Revitalization Committee's contracted engineering firm went over budget in part in order to offer the select board and the town a plan for sidewalks. And so in order to meet the final, their final commitment, they asked for $6,750 extra.
And that was approved at our meeting 2 weeks ago on a Friday morning.
Yes.
Great. So the next item is we're asking for $25,000 for a new 12-month contract starting January 1st, 2019 with Katie Berdan to create social media content for us throughout 2019. So it's covers a year of paying her to do what she's been doing really well for the last 6 months, which is sending out biweekly emails, populating the Woodstock VT website with information in one place that's both new and covering current happenings in Woodstock, but also things like school offerings and places of worship and hiking opportunities. So kind of evergreen content as well as current, up-to-date, what's happening next month or with foliage content. She's also doing Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for the town. So that's to extend her contract.
So does she promise a number of hours per week?
It's at 20 hours per week.
It's quite a lot of
Do you have any data on the metrics and kind of traffic you're getting?
Yeah, I don't have it right now. I think it's pretty, is it close to 15?
I think it's over 20.
Yeah, it has gone up from like 6,000 or something to up to over 20,000 page views.
20,000?
Page views, unique page views.
Okay, do you know how many people?
I don't have it right in front of me right now. I know that there's been a direct upward trajectory. Since she's started making this content, we've been tracking its efficacy and effectiveness. We know that people, as far as signups for the email newsletter, which goes out every 2 weeks, the numbers keep growing. And so we're very satisfied as far as page views go.
I think it would be useful from just kind of a sense of how things are working if you could do some kind of metrics on a regular basis.
We do that at our meetings,
Okay.
the EDC's monthly meetings.
Okay, are those shared, are they in the
They should be.
minutes?
Are they in the minutes?
No.
No, that granular information is not, but
Okay.
the meetings are open.
Okay.
I'm just curious, is that, the 25,000, is that her salary? And what is the time frame of that? And does it include payroll and, like, what does that 25,000 really
It's for
deliver?
12 months. We pay her as an individual independent contractor, and she submits invoices every 2 weeks, Sally? Yeah. So that's money allocated for the whole year, so that we don't have to come back and ask for more.
I mean, it seems to me this is sort of a more modern replacement for Warner Communications.
Exactly. And it's much more effective.
Right, it
as
was
far
paid a
as-
similar amount of money to come up with a handful of articles.
Warner was over twice.
Warner was
the
67.
So, you know,
Yeah.
if you're comparing,
Exactly. That's what we've felt, and
Right.
we've been really happy with what she's done, as far as like I said, populating the website with information on Woodstock that is true now, will be true regardless of the season, but then also doing more, time peg. I come from an editorial background, so like evergreens versus
yeah.
time news peg things. And what I'm really excited about with the concept of extending her contract for a full year is having some flexibility in the second half of this year with her. Now that, the website is relatively well populated right now. I think we still want to flesh out some pages, but it's looking good, which gives us a lot of flexibility with her hours later in the year as far as targeting, coming up with some more targeted marketing, almost very akin to what Warner was supposed to be doing, but kind of in a more bespoke way.
Right.
So that'll be really fun.
I would just say she's very receptive too.
I know.
Very accessible and receptive.
Yeah, she's wonderful.
So I propose a motion to approve the 25,000 for a new 12-month contract with Katie Padan.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? The ayes have it.
All right, next item is $4,000 for the website developer Origin for website maintenance for 6 months. This is retroactive because we have not paid them since September 1st, and this will end on March 31st. It's worth adding that the EDC is actively considering alternatives to the current retainer that we have them on that may be a little bit more cost effective. But we want to be sure to have everything covered until so that we can make our decisions in a way that won't create any kind of, black hole or problem.
And is this the only contract we have with Origin now?
Right, new websites just cost money.
It is true.
Forever.
Yep.
So we just have to pay for it, and that's part of what these funds are supposed to cover.
Exactly.
So, I would make a motion to approve the $4,000 to extend the contract through March 2019.
I'll second it.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
There is one last item.
We haven't finished yet.
Crap.
Wait your turn.
Yeah, I do.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Now,
Now, last item. We are asking for an approval to extend the existing memorandum of understanding with the chamber as pertains the website for an additional 3 months. Now that contract was supposed to have been, well, it does end on December 31st. And negotiations or conversations around how things are going to happen in the future have been a little bit slower than we had thought, mostly just because of negotiating them in November and having to have a lot of meetings. are taking a little longer than we had hoped.
For 3 months?
For 3 months.
And why 3 months?
Because we are actively discussing what's happening, and so things will change, but the contract ends on December 31st, so we need an extra couple months.
I propose a motion to approve that one.
Motion's been made, is there a second?
I have
I'll
one
second.
question. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Um,
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
I do have a question. The contract ends on December 31st, and we're approving this for 2 weeks?
For 3 months.
3 months.
For 3 months till March 31st?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Just
All
to,
right.
to give us enough
Thank you.
a buffer so we
Thank
don't run
you.
into this exact
Okay.
issue again. We're hoping to have it done well in advance of that, but
Thank you.
just in case.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it.
Thank
That's
you,
it.
Julia.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. So the next thing on the agenda is the town hall repairs. For those of you who haven't seen it, or we did a study of the town hall repairs and necessary repairs by an architect, JY Architect Firms out of Burlington, and he issued his report, and Jill has been working on that project and has a committee that's working on that project. So Jill, could you give us an update on your...
So we have a team doing a town hall rejuvenation project, and we've been looking at whether we should update it and how we should update it. And at various times there's been 21 different people from the town involved in that. So we've been looking at the inside, the outside, and the theatre area. And the group of us would propose that this is a really important building in the town, and it's an asset that we want to see preserved and rejuvenated. So just to put it in context, the last major renovation was carried out in 1985. That's more than 33 years ago. So when you look at the building, there's significant exterior work to be done, which was detailed in Jay White's report. And then there's significant work to be done in the theatre area. The stage area is potentially falling off the rest of the building. I mean, there's a crack there and it is falling away. And then inside, nothing has really been done except paint, I think, for a long time. So we sit in this meeting room and we don't really have multimedia. Everything could be upgraded if we all decided to do that. So we're still in the process of deciding how extensive the work could be to come back and make a big proposal. But the report from Jay White suggested that there's some exterior work that should be done fairly immediately. And there's work on the front of the building, which is critical because of safety issues. So there's several members of the team here tonight. Please jump in if you want to. But there's work to be done on the column bases, the granite steps, the red bricks on the portico, the asphalt walkway coming up to the main area. And that work was identified as costing about $20,000. And when the team looked at that work, you could certainly have like an absolute minimum amount of work to be done. But then the thought was, well, if you're going to be working there, why not do all of the stuff that needs to be done? Then on the west side of the building, there are critical modifications to prevent further degradation. So the two ramps that are there right now are causing a problem with the brickwork. So the rain hits the ramps and then splashes back to the bricks, and the bricks are deteriorating. So they're in very poor condition. So the suggestion is to take away the ramps, replace the rear ramp, and the costs of that are something like $45,000. These are just estimates right now. So that came into the critical modification. We kind of divided everything up. And then the third step was to do some more restoration work on the east side and the west side, so the brickworks and some repointing and things. And the fourth stage was to really take a look at the back of the building and see how serious the movement of the building is. So the architect suggested that the fill that the extension is built on is unstable. There is a crack in the building, so you can see where the building is moving. But nobody, so he has an opinion, and what we'd really like to do is to get a structural engineer in to give us a second opinion, to take a look at that whole structure and see what needs to be done to the structure, whether the air conditioning unit is affecting the rate of the rate of movement of that building, and then we can make a big plan.
Can I speak? Sure. I just, a little historical context. I think Pentangle, speaking for Pentangle, we did a feasibility study where we interviewed people about the renovation of the interior part of the theater. The theater is not up to code, which means that anytime a person comes in with a walker, a wheelchair, it's just not. And you can look around the town and see how the courthouse had to deal with that, how St. James had to deal with that. And I think it is time for this town to grapple with the fact that the largest public space is not accessible for people with mobility issues. And that's just aside from all the structural things. But I will say, when we did the feasibility study and we interviewed people, they were like, well, the town should pay for this, or Pentangle should pay for that. And when Pentangle came in the 80s, and we did not, I was not here, I was actually raising money for Pentangle as a 13-year-old. But there were people that lived in the village. They were people of means, they were philanthropic, and you can go down and look at the board of all the people that donated to do that renovation. We don't have that in the village anymore. 52% of the people that live in the village are second, third, fourth homeowners. So as an organization, we are strapped. As a town, we are strapped. But we are faced again with this amazing building that has so many issues. And I would just applaud Jill and the select board for looking at them. You can go into our green room and see the crack, which is when I talked to, actually we had a structural engineer come in and look for a feasibility study. He said, well, that crack is because the addition was built on fill and everything's going that way. And there's no blame. It's just like, this is an amazing space. And I think as a town, we have to say, do we want to support it and put the money in and keep it as the largest public space in this amazing tourist destination we have? Or do we want to go back to when we had back in 1979 when the fire chief went in and condemned the stage? That's where we're at. We are so close to that. And I guess I would just hope that everybody opens their eyes and ears and thinks, let's figure out how we can keep this building going. And it's not just about Pentangle, it's about this amazing resource that we have.
Thank you.
So can I propose 3 steps? Okay. So what the team recommends doing is filling in the unknowns to determine the options for the back of the building. So getting a structural engineer, doing a soil analysis, looking at the analysis of energy efficient alternatives for the air handling system. Engaging an architect to create a vision of how this interior space could really be, including the work that Pentangle's already done on the theatre. And then starting the critical restoration work as soon as we can, and then letting the team continue to develop a vision and the potential cost for the whole big project so that we can take it to the town and see if people are interested in doing it, and we can put a fairly real cost on it.
So I guess the sub-question is on that first part with what you consider critical renovation. We, as a board, have to decide how much of that renovation is critical and how to ask for the money.
So I have something else to add into that discussion. We have an endowment fund that is managed, that's owned by the town and is managed by us. And I've been talking to the team, and we think we might be able to use that fund to borrow the funds that are needed for, say, $100,000 worth of work. We could borrow it from that, so we wouldn't have to put it on our operating budget and increase taxes.
Borrow from ourselves.
Yes.
The only thing to keep in mind is every time you do any improvements to an interior structure, your compliance for ADA goes up. The amount of money you spend, your compliance goes up. And probably 90% of this building is not ADA compliant.
So I'm suggesting that we do some of the exterior work that's needed to stop things getting worse and for safety issues, and then we approach the vision of the theatre and the interior as one big project, which will be more than 250,000.
Yes.
And we'll have to consider ADA as those things are triggered.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think the Board of Selectmen is committed to keep this building and make it compliant for, as you say, everybody to use and to enjoy. And so,
$100,000 if we were to borrow it from the endowment fund. How much of the work would that accomplish?
It should accomplish the work at the front of the building to do both the safety work and some of the restoration work and the west side ramps. So we could go out and get costs for that to see.
You have to remember, this is only an architect's estimate. This is not
Right.
firm.
you only know what it costs when you put it out for bid.
Right.
Yeah.
So maybe we could go as far as putting out for bid now.
Tom?
I'm confused by the word borrow. You mean borrow from the principal of the endowment and pay that back over time, or just spend principal?
Borrow and pay back over time. So if we paid back, including the interest that we've not earned in the marketplace, then the fund wouldn't suffer at all and we would still have the money in perpetuity.
So depending on how the fund is doing, is that a cheaper interest rate? If the fund is doing well, can't you borrow money more cheaply on the open market?
Well, right now, the way the market is performing, I believe it's cheaper there. But the investment committee will meet on Wednesday and talk about this in more detail.
Good,
It's just
because
first
the way the
conversations.
market's performing right now, it's pretty bad time to be selling off your stocks.
Except they're not earning anything either.
No, but you're going to take a wicked hit on your principal by selling stocks in the current market.
We have quite a lot of money in the bond market, so I believe we'll look at that as well to make sure it's sensible.
All right, well, bonds aren't doing particularly well right now either because interest rates are going up.
There's some good people on that committee who are
Good.
better informed than I
I think
am.
it's important you look into it because borrowing, in other words, spending principal out of your endowment fund is not necessarily a good financial move.
So we'll look at that and we could compare it with borrowing from banks as well.
I mean, what, just out of curiosity, the people in the room, I mean, do you agree that this is an important building to take care of and that it seems like it's time to do this again and that we've done the right steps to, I mean, I'm not sure we can, I mean, you can always wait on everything, but it doesn't necessarily get any better. I mean, but it's hard for the five of us to determine what the taxpayer wants to do and how much they're willing to spend on it. So this seems like a bit of more of a quorum than we're used to. You know, how do people feel?
I think that people really want to see this building refurbished and made safe and continue to, you know, Pentangle Arts is one of the few entertainments other than going out to eat in the city, in the town. So it has a critical function for a lot of people, and yeah, it would be a big loss if it did get condemned by the fire chief.
Go ahead,
Yeah,
sir.
I agree with that. I would like to know more about what is the endowment fund we're talking about? What is it and what is its purpose?
When Rockefeller sold the mansion to the national park, he left a fund of money to pay his taxes because we can't, the park doesn't pay taxes. So that money was invested and we draw an amount to cover the taxes on the property.
I think Tom could probably explain that a little bit. Tom?
No, Jill's got it right.
Okay.
So the Rockefellers actually didn't sell to the government, they donated to the government. But that was the idea. Money was set aside in an endowment to cover the town and the village for the loss in property tax revenue that occurred when
that property went out of private hands and into the hands of the federal government.
So now that fund is worth 1.7 million, and there's a team of people who meet regularly and look at that fund and look at the split between stocks and bonds, and have been doing some modelling recently to see if there is a way that that fund can contribute more to town expenditure without jeopardising the fund living in perpetuity, which was one of Rockefeller's wishes.
I guess I would ask Phil to explain what we're doing with some of that money now, the 40,000 and...
So currently, the current fiscal year, the select board's budget pulls $60,000 of income as income to help run the town, which is probably tied to what the taxes on the house plus 500 acres on Mount Tom would be, since the federal government doesn't pay school tax.
So I mean, it's worth, we've really not used it for anything other than that over the last, 20 plus years. So the question is, when do you ever use it? And we didn't, I always say it was the money we had saved for a rainy day, but we didn't use it for the rainiest day we had, Irene. So, it's a question of what it is for. Do you ever use it? How do you use it? What is worthy of spending?
One ahead of you.
Okay, sorry.
He's been patient.
So Sonia, you asked, how do people feel about spending the money? As a taxpayer, my objective would be to keep taxes low over the next long term, because we're here for the long term. And with that objective in mind of keeping taxes low, I think we have to spend this money. How we finance it is it's an important question, but secondary. If we want to keep taxes low, we need to repair the building. Otherwise, taxes are going to go up when we have to replace the building.
Right.
I think you've outlined a strategic approach to this, and I think that's the really critical thing here. This building is an asset that the town needs, not just for government, but for kind of the community spirit of the town and for all of the things that go on here. If there's stuff that has to get fixed immediately, that should get fixed, but there should also be a long-term plan, however it's financed, to make sure that you're not always just playing catch-up and pointing the bricks again because there was never enough work done to mean you didn't have to point the bricks again. So I think as long as there's a strategic plan going forward, then you got to spend this money sooner rather than later, or you're going to be spending more later, and then go ahead and start spending the money on doing the improvements that the building needs to be compliant, to be safe, to be welcoming, et cetera, et cetera. So I think you've got a strategic plan that makes a lot of sense.
Tom, do you have another question or comment, Tom?
I would just, two, I guess, and I think this gentleman's absolutely right. The way of financing it is sort of secondary to the bigger question. I would just caution that taking out money out of an endowment with the idea that you're going to pay it back later is very risky. And I could rattle off, I can think of 3 examples right here in town where that exact thing has been done and the endowments have disappeared. So I warn against that risk. The other is, this same question, of course, came up 30 years ago when the building was actually in much worse shape. And there was a definite split in town whether or not to fix it or whether to set off somewhere else and build a smaller, more efficient building. And the town at that point, obviously, decided to take this building and fix it up. And several years after that, actually, I forget exactly, not too long after that, made the arrangement, came to an arrangement with Pentangle so that Pentangle could run the theater. I suspect that sentiment is the same, but a big question will be the dollars. I mean, back then, and Phil, you came in right about that time. I'm trying to remember, were we talking $250,000? We did a lot of work for a lot less money. but.
It was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I suspect that the community will want to restore this building as long as the price tag isn't, incredibly.
Tom, was that at the time to do that they sold the town forest? Was that
Never
part?
sold the town.
Never sold.
No, it was
Locked it
sold
off
the-
the first time then.
Sold the old dump.
Sold the old dump.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was the same, we did that at the same time, or roughly the same time, but it was a separate issue.
We did go through a little bit of it. I mean, Jill, when she initiated this project, she put it out on the listserv. People came, people volunteered, people divvied up, people talked to other people. So there was a little bit of that assessing what the community wants. And we even opened it up like, what if we were to move the town offices to another building? Would we want to use that? And some people had some ideas, and in the end, we realized that there just isn't the appetite to change the function of the building too much. So there was some of that work done.
And there is a visioning process still going on just for the whole town about what do you do with a town where 52% of your local people are not local people? What do you do in a town when you've got young people coming in who are affluent but are not stepping up and being on select boards? They're not coaching. The culture has changed, and I think, Tom, when we go back to when I grew up, as I said before, we had people that lived in the village that the only reason Pentangle moved off a high street in here and took over the movie operation was because they were local people who had money and had a sense of philanthropy and sense of community. Our culture has changed, and we have to adjust to that. What I would say about where this building goes forward, it's like any town building, and I'm sure Phil would probably agree with me, is you can't run a town without somebody in charge. You got someone in charge of roads, you got the police, you got the fire. Who's in charge of the buildings? Who's the person that's going to go around and check the boilers? Who do I call? Who's the super I call when things are not working? We've never had that in the village. And what happens when there's no body following what is breaking down
I
is
always
stuff.
managed to find my phone number.
Oh, I know. But I would just say to the select board, I think you should think carefully about
I respectfully disagree with you on that. I think Phil's done an excellent job in managing his buildings in this town and making the board aware of any issues.
I would agree, but there's a point which one man can't keep up with everything with aging buildings. And Phil knows this because I've had to bother him at family parties when the boilers aren't working. And it is not, I'm not being disrespectful to Phil.
Well, there comes a point where you can be penny wise and pound foolish about your repairs. And we may have hit that point on this particular building where we're spending more to repair the same old things over and over again, and it would be better just to get new boilers, which we did.
Yes.
You know, but there are starting to be enough things like that in this building that we have
It's
to
not
pay
even this
careful
building.
attention.
The town has a lot of buildings and issues, and there's not one man, like Phil can't spend his whole time going around and checking issues.
No, we got a highway superintendent for the highway project. I got Chief Green for the fire.
I know, but who do you have for buildings?
They all take care of their own bills.
So is there anybody that's got anything different that they'd like to add to this conversation? I'd just like to thank Jill and her committee for the work that they've done on this. And I can tell you that I think this board is committed to take care of this building and all of our buildings. So, but we need to hear what the people want to do and where they want to get the money and how much it's going to cost. Roy.
I think probably things need to be repaired, but I agree with Tom. We should not borrow from an endowment fund to do upkeep and future maintenance.
All right. Anything else? All right, so moving right along to the next item on the agenda.
Can we agree on the next steps?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't know that we need to do that tonight.
Do we need to vote on any of them? Or is it just, we want to get a structural engineer as soon as possible?
Yeah, I'll deal with that in a few, yeah. We are going to deal with it, for sure. Okay, the next thing on the agenda is Dave Green, the fire chief, has got some things he'd like to discuss. Number one is your ambulance bid.
Yes. So, sorry, I was late.
That's all right, you're not late, you're right on time.
Yep. So, back in October, we signed, approved a bid for an ambulance at the price tag of $132,000. Finally got the contract assigned, and that ambulance has gone up too because they forgot items, a little under 145. So I'm asking to hold this bid, and I've talked to the company. Can I look for demos or another available option to get it back down to where I think it should be?
And where?
I'm not sure, but I'd like to research it. This company has played a little bit of game in my mind, and I don't think it's fair, and I'd like to hold his feet to the fire and look around and say, these are what our options are.
So if I can verify, you think it'd be less expensive to buy a whole new ambulance than to take that box and swap it onto a new chassis?
I do. That's the price.
And then we can
I'm not sure, but I want the time to look, which may push, the ambulance, if you ask where that ambulance is, it may be delayed.
If you're gonna save us money, I think we're all in favor.
That's what I'm trying to do.
So, will that change your ambulance rotation time?
No, I hope to have it done by this spring. I have a new one in the house, but I just want some time to delay it and make sure we're getting our best people.
So the original plan was to keep the actual box and put it on a new chassis, and that was the original money-saving idea.
Yeah.
But that has proven to be,
it
doesn't really save us any money. Right, okay. So for future reference, we probably will not be going down that road again.
I agree.
More headache than it's worth, it sounds like.
It sounds like it.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know that we need a motion on that.
Nope.
No, I just
that'd be great.
make you aware.
But one thing in our packet we don't have to decide is the loan payment or the borrowing money for the ambulance. Do we need to deal with that now?
No, we can wait until we get a price.
Yeah.
We know how much we have in the bank and capital reserve and how much
Right.
we need. And
Right.
but who knows? We definitely won't need as much.
Okay. So the next thing, David, from you is your committee report on the fire station renovations and the proposal from the architect that you interviewed.
Yep, so our committee is, for people who don't know, looking to build a new emergency services building. The one we have has, we've outgrown our needs for it. So a committee was formed. We've met several times over the last couple of months. We've come up with what our needs are, what works in that building, what doesn't, what we'd like to see. And we've all come to a consensus, all four services, EMS, fire, police, and dispatch. So we've talked to an architect at this point, shown him what we were thinking. He has given us a proposal to move forward with conceptual drawings. NBF is, I know, somebody I chose. Because this isn't the first building I've built for you. I've already built the town garage. Moving on to this building, a little more difficult due to code because we're going to have storage, industrial, dispatch, lockup, and sleeping. So it's really a code-heavy building. And right now, in my current job as state fire marshal, I've dealt with this company. They built some major buildings over Rutland Way, Middlebury Way, Burlington, and I feel comfortable using them. A lot of the architects I've seen concentrate on residential side. This building is definitely not this. To give you an example, the State Police Dispatch Center in Rockingham was recently built a couple of years ago. Well, the architects really messed it up. It cost the state over $1 million and a year delay to get it right because they didn't follow the correct codes. So like I said, this is the same situation, and we have to be very cognizant of who we pick and who we choose to do this. In my mind, there's only a few companies that are capable to do this, and NBF is local. One of their major players live right in this area. So we passed the proposal on to the town. See where you guys stand with us.
Does that answer the questions that you had, Jill?
I have a few more.
Okay.
So how many other people how many other architect firms in Vermont have these kind of skills?
Well, I know of a couple. Most of them tend to live Burlington area. So while they may do good work, the mileage, the rates, everything's closer, and this guy is a local company.
So the concern I had before was that although we're only hiring them to do concept drawings, they, in the third paragraph of the second page of their proposal, they write that they expect to continue as the project designers, which means we're hiring a firm potentially to do a project that costs many hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Correct.
And I would love to see them before we make that commitment. And maybe anybody else that you think is worthy of seeing.
Sure, that's your pleasure, and yeah.
I'm just curious as to if this actually went out for an RFP, and why are we not getting multiple quotes on what this work will cost? I mean, everything that we've been doing in terms of consultants, we generally write an RFP and send it out, and there are surprisingly more firms in Vermont that are interested in this kind of work than you would think. So I just feel like we as a community should be looking at different options and making sure that we have the best firm. It's quite possible that they are the best firm, but unless there's some sort of comparison, then we don't really know that. And I would be glad to sit in on a design selection as a registered architect in the state of Vermont that used to do a lot of work on public safety buildings in Massachusetts, admittedly 30 years ago. But I would be glad to be part of that conversation as well.
Take your time. What are you looking for a timing situation?
Well, I was asked to have this prepared so it could go before the voters next March.
For town meeting?
For town meeting of next year.
2019?
2020. So are they needing more than a year to do concept drawings?
They're going to need a while. They'll be cutting it close depending on how long the delay is.
The other question I had was, did you talk to them about energy and how they would...
That's a required code.
But I would like... The reason that the EMS building is even up for discussion is because when we went to do energy efficiency work, to see what energy efficiency work could be done there, we discovered how awful it was.
Sure.
And that it wasn't worth spending a dime on that building.
Yep.
And it's possible to get your energy efficiency much higher than state codes. And I would really like to see if that's possible down there. So your neighbors, for example, have ground source heating.
Yep. Like I said, we're just starting work on this. Energy hasn't, and I know that this whole board is aware of that, and or would like to see a very energy efficient building. We just haven't got to that point to discuss it with them yet.
So I suppose the other thing I'd like to see is understand what their process and procedure is, and when we can get them more involved.
Yeah, their first step, as they said, is they need to come see what we have for lot sizes, what works.
We can put that in the RFP.
So if we wrote an RFP and went out to another couple of firms and had them come and meet us, could they do that in January for our general meeting?
Yeah.
We will.
Or after.
Yes. Well, we would, if that's what the board wants to do, we'd work real hard to get something to bring to you for proposals for your January meeting.
And the cause of the concern is not that it's a $15,000 project. It's that we're choosing a company for a much bigger project than this, based on my understanding from the last meeting.
In that paragraph, it says if the project is approved by the voters, they expect to continue on the project and prepare construction drawings. But if we were to take this firm, there's no guarantee that they're going to be this successful. person.
No, but when we spoke about this in the last meeting, Phil said the common practice is to go with the same firm, because by then you're comfortable with them. So we just want to make sure we're working with the best to start with.
That company's going to bring forward the ideas that get sold to the community as being good ideas for how to address a working building on site and working around it. That's intellectual property. So it's a lot easier to come in after the thinking has been done and do the construction drawings.
Well, then I think I mean, if you're going with that approach, then there really should be a much more careful consideration of the firm at the beginning. And personally, I think that then it should be maybe one contract, so that, you know, you don't necessarily say there's even a possibility, but make sure you select the correct firm at the start of the process. This is a really important building. It's a very public site, and people are going to see it, so you want it to look good. It has a presence for our community, so you really should make sure that you have the right people to do it.
I realize that, and I was at that meeting when we talked with this firm, and I brought that point up to them, that this is very important, and they said, you know, they understand that, they know Woodstock, and they know our differences. My concern is that the exterior of what the building looks like is not the most important thing for the next 100 years. It's that we follow all the codes and all the environmental issues and all of the other things that most people don't know anything about. You know, the distance between fire trucks on the apparatus floor and the decontamination system that's required for after a fire, and the storage of hazardous materials, and for the police department, the storage of their weapons, the storage of their drugs. And there's, you know, a lot of people who've not had the experience in that. I think the exterior of the building is very important to the community, but what the functions are within the inside of it are for those people who are going to use it, for how many bays do we need, you know, all of that stuff that is so important. And that's why I think experience we will get a chance to interrogate whoever designs the building when it comes to the planning commission, what it looks like on the outside and the function of that. But what goes on inside, I think, is only the people who use it and the people who know what the codes are. And I'm sure there are other architects who have this experience, but I don't know of any. I know that of some that have hired them. Well, Rockingham is a good example. Cost the state a heck of a lot of money down there.
So we know not to use
those. You don't know who else is out there. Right.
That's right.
We may end up with these guys at the end, but we have to go through the process.
You should just take a more careful look at
this. The clock is ticking.
Yeah.
Can I ask, in the absence of doing an RFP, where do, have the requirements been listed beyond, obviously you know what codes need to be fulfilled, or the architects will need to know what codes need to be fulfilled, but for example, if you do want to go above and beyond in energy conservation, where would requirements like that be baked into this process? Would it be, if you're not doing an RFP, because if you're doing an RFP, obviously you would put that into the RFP, but if you're not doing an RFP, when do a set of must-have and want-to-have requirements get baked into the process?
So we've already had a list, and like I said, energy efficiency was not on that list yet. Right now, we're trying to figure out if we can get what we need in that space. Right. So that's the reason we're moving forward with conceptual drawings and having an architect look at all of our needs for the building just to meet code. Yeah.
I mean, it's an interesting discussion, because the town hall rejuvenation is going to end up in exactly the same place. In that we want to hire an architect to do conceptual drawings, looking at the interior space, and so we're making a decision about how we purchase services when they're over a certain amount of money in general.
Since you mentioned that again, is this firm, would they if they were to be a successful firm, would they be qualified to do the architectural part for town hall?
Sure. Absolutely.
Two very different types of projects.
I know that, that's why I asked that.
As far as the engineering is concerned for the rear, might meld, but for,
So you want this to go before town meeting in 2020?
That's what I was asked to have it prepared for.
David, is this going to be built on the same site, or are you looking at additional sites?
Same site.
Okay.
Yep.
the good thing about the site is so many of the other wastewater, all stormwater, it's all been approved, and Act 250 and all of that is come into play. And besides, there is no other place to go.
Honestly, Butch, when we bought that, we weren't buying the building. I mean, we were buying the site right outside the village, lots of road frontage, deep lot. I mean, the building was never the prize there.
Did you say at the last time we spoke about this, there's money in the select board contingency now that we could?
You've got money in the bank. I believe you spent. There's money in the bank, select board contingency, and I think there's some in the current operating budget to cover the 15,000.
David, how many other, you are in these buildings all the time. Where have they worked?
They have worked all over the state. They've done work for Rutland Regional. They just built Castleton, a fire station. I believe they did their town hall too. I didn't bring their packet, but.
A complicated, not complicated, but a situation where many venues of emergency services are in one building. Where fire, ambulance, police, we have a dispatch center.
So Castleton has fire and police. They don't have dispatch in that building. As far as other fire stations, I can't think of one right offhand.
Contract with Bridgewater?
I think they're trying to get one tonight. I'm not sure where it stands.
I don't feel this discussion is about whether these people are qualified or not qualified. Nobody's questioning that. We're just questioning how we as a town want to make a decision that potentially is going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars and ultimately millions of dollars.
Sure.
And whether we should take a little bit more time to choose the company so that we're all sure that we're making the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, it may be that they're the only ones who reply to the RFP. But I would just assume.
We'll not have a long lead time.
Right, I would just assume
But we'll run
do
ads.
one though, yeah. So I think we're agreed on that. Or, I mean, are we?
Yeah, I think so. Question is, who's going to do the legwork?
How much time are we going to allow for all of this? What do you think is reasonable with budget time and everything?
I'd ask our professional architect.
Well, I guess the question is really, is this an RFP where you're asking for a proposal and a fee, or are you asking for information? So there's a difference in
I do not envision a request for qualifications. I think at this point we have qualifications. I think people want to know what it's going to cost, and that's going to be fees and what the percentage of the project would be for designing and managing the construction.
And also, but does that cover?
And it would include qualifications.
Right.
Of
the lead people.
In all probability, this plan that we would go forward would also require plans for sleeping facilities for emergency service personnel.
Yes.
You want to have something to talk to the people about at town meeting this year, I mean, in 19 as well, I'm sure. Are we going to go and say, we want to do this, we don't have an architect, do we want what is the time limit that you want to give for this kind of the RFP, all of that to be done? Can this be done in a month or two?
Well, given the state of the building now, I don't know enough about the building, but I just don't think that you rush the big, and knowing building buildings, you don't rush the beginning stage, because that's the only time you have to do your homework, to meet the people, to choose with confidence, to do your drawings, to change your drawings before you spend $1 on construction. So I think you take as long as it takes, and you do it properly.
Well, that brings up the question, Dave, is that meaning if you're having overnight and building birthing quarters, are you, not birthing quarters, sleeping quarters, are you going to propose eventually to have some more full-time firemen?
Eventually it's going to head that way.
I would think so.
As we heard the other day, 52% of these buildings are second homes. We're running out of people. Fast.
That's going to be expensive.
Fast.
Yeah, we're coming up on several forks in the road where we have to decide what kind of services we're providing for the town that we're becoming.
So I think you have to have that in hand before you hire an architect.
Yeah, no, but I think what you can say at town meeting, even if you haven't hired a specific architect, is that we've started this process and that this is one of the next big projects we have to think about. And it includes sleeping quarters because of the way our town is changing. And that's going to affect the costs that go into the budget over the next, 5+ years. It's reality is coming. We have to see it coming.
And right now, we already provide sleeping quarters.
Yes, we do.
And they aren't great, and they are not working for us.
They're not in that building.
They're not in that building.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yeah.
But I think Jill is right. I mean, if you go out and you get several RFPs and you make a decision, it's going to be much easier for the town to accept, to say they didn't just look at one architect, they actually looked, if you need town buy-in, doing an RFP process helps town buy-in.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Well, I was prepared to make a motion to hire this architect for the $15,000. Because I know that we want to move forward on a lot of things, and that was my preparation. That was my initial action for tonight, was to make a motion to hire this architectural firm. And I wanted to hear what David said. And based on his experience and and this is nothing, I'm not saying anything to deny you aren't well qualified, Sally, but I'm prepared to make a motion to hire this firm tonight. I don't know if it will get a second, I don't know if it will pass, but I felt David did what Butch asked him to do based on our conversation at the last meeting. So I will make that motion. We have it in the contingency fund and other places to hire MBF.
Do I hear a second to the motion?
I'll second it.
Motion has been made and seconded to proceed with MBF for the $15,000 to, as they laid it out in their letter. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
3-2 vote. Ayes have it.
So you're voting for the 15,000, but not the total project?
Voting for the 15,000.
Okay, just to be really clear, because we're going to discuss this again.
Yes, absolutely. Just the 15,000.
So now can I talk about a structural engineer again? I'd like to employ a structural engineer to come and look at the rear of the theatre to give us an opinion about what's happening.
Can we ask MBF if they would provide anybody from their structural engineer team to help us and give us some idea?
Yep, that would be fine. if they can do the work in the next few weeks so that we can really carry on putting a plan together. And I'm also going to present you with an architect to do the interior work on a conceptual basis next meeting. Okay, we'll go out and find somebody.
So was there a motion that you...
So can I propose a motion to hire a structural engineer in the next few weeks to look at the back of the building?
I think you also have to have somebody who's going to, structural engineer also has to have somebody who's going to take borings to see what the fill is really like under the back of that building.
And do you have one person do both things or two different?
The structural engineer will know somebody.
Do we need a motion to do?
No, I think we'll see if we can find a structural engineer, contact these people to see what they have on board, and if they're willing to help us.
Okay.
Did you have someone in mind, Joe?
Well, we've had 2 others work for the town this year, so we can check their availability too. But if these guys will do it, there's no reason not to.
Thank you.
All right. Next thing on the agenda. What's that?
I don't see the capital budget discussion on there, but you've got a lot of people from the capital budget.
Are we talking about new business now?
Excuse me?
Are we talking about new business now?
No, we're not in, yes, we are, sir.
I would beg your permission to make a comment about item 5A.
Yes.
Which we covered. I intended to be here to support the candidature of Bob Merrill, whom I've known for some time, and you've made a really excellent choice. I didn't need to do that. But I didn't come here to be told that I was resigning and that I was leaving town by somebody I have not discussed this with, Dave Brown. I'm sorry he's not here right now. I've not discussed it with him at all, and he has essentially said that I will be resigning and that he wants my job. And I think this is really presumptuous, and I want to tell you that I planned to inform the Select Board about my resignation and my leaving, and I have not done so because I don't yet have a fully signed contract on my house. And so I want to assure you that I will do my duties, and I will speak for myself in this matter and not through a proxy. And on a positive note, the buyers, we believe the buyers, we know the buyers, and they are a 12-month residential inhabitant of Woodstock.
Thank you. I'm sorry for it.
No, that's all right. He upended the agenda.
Yeah. That was also our mistake that we allowed that to happen. And I don't know how that happened, but I shall certainly look into that. The next thing on the agenda...
I just want to say something about...
He sent a letter
Phil.
asking to be considered.
Phil, you mentioned capital budget. By the time the agenda was done last week, I didn't know that we hadn't heard from Tom. I didn't know his phone and
I'm just saying,
internet was out.
Bush want to take them up while they're here.
Yeah. Okay. So, with your permission, we'll move to the Capital Budget Committee for their report. Because I know they got to go, some are old and some have to get home and do chores.
I'm old.
Yeah.
Phew,
So,
thought you were talking about me.
Roy and I haven't met to discuss the presentation really. I just wanted to give you a brief idea of what we did and what we didn't do. The bulk of the capital budget, as you know, is comprised of replacing things that we already own, and that's pretty cut and dry. We have highway trucks on a schedule, and ambulances on a schedule, and so on. And especially, it's cut and dry out for the 5 years, and which varies a little. The ambulances are on a little longer schedule. You get out beyond that, it's a little less cut and dry for a number of reasons. One is, we're estimating costs for equipment out beyond, a time frame where we really know what the cost will be. And it also can run into policy questions, which the Capital Budget Committee isn't really qualified to make decisions on, and what Dave's left. But for example, not the current fire truck we're looking at, but the next one, Dave brought up the question of whether that should be a ladder truck and not just replacing what we have now. And so the Capital Budget Committee, we're not in a position to make that call. That's going to be as you know from past history, that's going to be a discussion for town meeting. And so we can't, in a situation like that, it's hard for us to say what the budget should be for again, not for the immediate fire truck, but the next one that's 5 or 6 years out. The 10, I think we might want to revisit the going out 10 years. I think the idea of looking out 10 years is great, and especially pinpointing things that are not just replacement items. Whether we should attempt to take things that are out past 5 years and make a detailed capital budget for them. We can do it. I'm not sure how accurate it really is. We may be just as well off saying, out past 5 years, we've got these things coming that we have to keep in mind. I don't know, it's just something we should probably talk about. I feel pretty comfortable about the first 5 years of the capital budget. Out beyond that, I think it's important to discuss that, but how accurate our figures are, I'm not sure they're great. And the other policy thing that comes up is the whole question that we've had before of saving up money to buy or borrowing money or leasing. Again, the Capital Budget Committee is in a way not in a great position to make those recommendations. And just a case in point, while we were having our meetings, we were also hearing about the whole town issues with the town hall and the possible costs there and costs that are immediate. That will be borne in the next few years that aren't out past 5 years, but here and now. So for us to say, well, we think until the decision on the town hall is made, which is a select board decision, it's hard to make any recommendation on, are we going to borrow money, for a truck, or are we going to save money for a truck 4 years out? Because if we have to borrow, depending on what happens in the town hall, if we put out a bond on the town hall and do a big project, or if we raise taxes and do it incrementally, that affects the decision you make on the capital budget as to whether you're going to raise tax money to pay for things or borrow or lease. So I don't know if we've let you down on that, but really, when you see the capital budget, there will be things that are marked down for saving money up over time, and there are things that are marked for leasing. But those recommendations are there without knowledge of the rest of the budget. And so you guys sort of have you have the overview that the Capital Budget Committee doesn't really have. And so when you make your decisions, and again, I'll use the town hall as an example because it's right on top of us. When you make those decisions in your budget, then that affects what you do with a capital budget for highway items or ambulance or any of the rest of them. There are a couple thoughts on, and so part of the idea of the capital budget is to level out impact on taxpayers over time. And there, a couple things came up at some of the various meetings we had. And one is, because we put together a capital budget and list all the things we have to replace with dollar amounts on each of them. But at the end of the day, there's an appropriation of a certain amount of money. And it's based on the information in the capital budget, but the appropriation from the taxpayers is not so many $1,000s for a truck and so many $1,000s for new radios. To level things out for the taxpayer over time, oh, excuse me, I have to back up. The other thing we do, as you know and have seen, is if we need a $50,000 truck in 5 years, and the capital budget is just 10,000 this year, 10,000, 10,000, 10,000. But if you have a grader and an ambulance, for instance, like we do now, coming up in the same year, you're still going to have years that are higher and lower. But there's no reason that has to be a straight line saving. So if you have a year that's going to have a smaller impact on the taxpayers, you could actually say, instead of saving $10,000 a year for 5 years, we're going to save $10,000 this year, nothing the next year, $20,000 the following year. You see what I mean? And level out the impact for the taxpayers that way. And it works whether you're, regardless of how you're financing it.
So did you do some of that?
No, we didn't. It came up, I'm just, again, and the same with the question of how to handle things out past 5 years. There was discussion of that.
Well, that's hard.
But you know, it's, again, it's something that probably bears looking at, how we do that. And the same, well, you did the spreadsheet for us that showed how the capital budget was going to be up and down and up and down. Yeah. One thing we definitely came up with, I think we very much agreed on, was if you want to level that out, don't do it by saying, well, we'll go 6 years on the truck instead of 5. No one on the committee would recommend that. Okay. But as you look at the numbers for the capital budget over the next 5 years, say, and how to come up with that money, one factor would be what else is going on outside of the capital budget, like the town hall, and another would be, well, if we have a peak and valley, we know we're going to need this amount of money 5 years from now, but we don't have to raise the same amount every year. We can raise, when we have a peak, we can raise less for something, and when we have a valley, we can raise more.
Tom, one of the things that you said at the town meeting last year was the general idea of borrowing money rather than saving money was better for most taxpayers. Are you still behind that idea?
I think, and it may have been, I've heard a lot of people say that. I think what I meant to say, and hope I said, was that we've always balanced the borrowing and the saving. Mm-hmm. And it was my impression, at least, that the select board had moved away from that. And was,
but didn't.
Excuse me?
We thought about doing it, but we didn't. After you had talked.
Oh, after town meeting, right. The budget that I was addressing, I think the select board had moved away from that and was spending, either raising money or spending money that had already been saved and paying cash for things, which in the past we had done a little bit of both. Not a little bit of both, but most of these things, a lot of both. And that was what I objected to. And I still would. And what I am recommending and what's in the capital budget is that we do some saving, and we also do some either leasing or borrowing. And that's another way of spreading it out for the taxpayers.
And then this time next year, we'll have a very different discussion. Maybe we'll have a different discussion because we'll be talking about how do we do the big ticket items plus the capital budget, and then maybe we can look at the bigger picture then.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say that I guess one of my hopes for this year, but it can be an ongoing hope, is that eventually the capital budgeting committee does also look at bigger projects. I feel like, you know, as I've said to other people, that this town was sort of traumatized by Irene and hasn't really taken on big projects since Irene and the debt incurred by Irene. And we sort of have to get back into thinking about bigger projects. And I think you're right, it's very strange for the capital budget committee to be asked to do a job that without any knowledge of these other big ticket things that are coming down the pipeline. I mean, how can you make decisions with missing information? And you truly didn't have any information about what the town hall renovations might cost. But it's my hope that in the future, the select board and the capital budgeting committee can work together on a more holistic plan and include talking about how to finance things. I mean, you know, I want to hear more about why you don't borrow from endowments. Like, let's go back to that. You know, there are a lot of people on that capital budgeting committee with a lot of financial acumen that this board doesn't necessarily have, because we primarily deal with day-to-day operational decisions. And so I would love to have a 10-person discussion about the whole plan, you know, moving forward if we can. I mean, selfishly, because it's, as one of the 5 responsible people, that feels like a huge weight. I don't know, do you want to keep town hall? Do you want to fix town hall? Do we want to borrow from the endowment? Like, Lordy, I'm 20% of that decision? No, I'd rather be 10% of that decision.
That's why you get the big bucks.
Right. But you know what I mean? So my hope is that committee would be, you know, a committee of people who aren't necessarily interested in what goes on here, but who are really interested in a bigger picture, not necessarily 10 years, but even just 5-year aperture of the whole budget, you know, including some of these big ticket things, as well as the timed saving and borrowing for the regular purchases, you know, just with the whole picture. So that didn't happen this year necessarily because of timing, but my hope is that in the future that can be something we look into doing maybe.
Well, it certainly is a bigger job for the capital budget committee, and yeah, we couldn't start in October. We'd have to.
Right, and it's a question. I mean, it's a fair question to ask if the committee wants to be that. I mean, you know, you are your own committee. If that's not the role you want to play, that's, you know, we can take that under advisement and talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, the committee would have to look at it.
We're all
I mean, as I say, traditionally the bulk of the capital budget committee's work has been fairly cut and dry because it's replacing equipment.
Right.
And you know, this year the highway department had a couple things which they would like, you know, new pieces of equipment they haven't had in the past. And we certainly discussed them at some length. I think at the end of the day, it seemed like maybe one of them was something that probably made quite a lot of sense, but we weren't sure this year's budget really had room for it. And another one I had more questions about. And getting into like a new emergency services building, that's a big, it's a big thing to pile on.
It would represent a big departure from what's been done in the past, so that would have to be something we discussed, obviously.
Yeah. And of course, at the end of the day, it's all up to the selectmen. I mean, you guys are the ones who are.
Well, it's like women too, actually.
Excuse me.
But we would love, but we have to, but they're big decisions, and it would be good, like Sonia said, to have more minds who are used to working with money to work out how we're going to pay them. That would
be there in just a minute. There's a
Start-
question over there.
I think you guys-
She's jumping out of her seat.
I think you guys would do really well to invest a few $1,000s in a budgeting software. Spreadsheets are a ridiculous way to try and project the budget or to do any kind of what-if scenario. You don't know whether to sell, bond or borrow or save or whatever. You can do what-if scenario planning. It can connect to your GL, your expenses, your HR. You can do it all together, and you can answer those questions. Where do we want to be in 10 years? How are we going to get there? What what if the interest rates change? What if borrowing costs go up? You can put that all into the model, and it'll cost you a few $1,000s and we'll answer these questions.
Roy?
Yeah. Well, I've been on this capital budget committee since I retired as selectman about 12 years ago. And it's hasn't been an easy job, but we know that you're trying to hold the budget down where the taxpayers will approve it using the capital budget and your budget and holding the budget to maybe 3 to 5% increase. Well, this first year we've been asked to do a 10-year plan. And I can't get my arms around a 10-year plan. I can see some big ticket items like he's talking about, a new fire station or whatever you have, but I think we should really do a thorough job on 5 years and maybe look at some of these big ticket items 10 years. And that's the only way I think we can approach it. I don't think I'm not going to say it's not worth our time, but I think we've spent a little more time going out beyond 5 years than we should have.
I appreciate all the time you spent on it. I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
You're fine.
No, it's
Yeah.
hard to find volunteers these days for any kind of service, so I really do appreciate the many, many meetings you had.
And your experience.
And your experience,
And
of
your
course.
experience, yeah.
Well,
experience. I have to throw in that the department has made our job easier. I mean, they arrived with very thorough.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. Anything else, Tom? Roy?
No, if
Thanks.
someone has questions.
Well, I appreciate your appointing me all these years. I'm trying to do as good as I can, but I'm getting older,
No.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
over 80 now,
Okay, well, we appreciate your experience. Thank you. Thanks. We'll see you at town meeting.
Yep.
I'm going to be interested to hear about the town audit. I've been through it once.
Yeah.
And it was a lot easier back then, I think.
Yeah.
But it's a great building, and I mean, that was the decision 30 years ago.
Sure.
We were making in exactly the same spot a building that needed a lot of
Well,
work.
when this idea of a new emergency service building came up, it was, do we incorporate it all in? And people that were up to research that came back with, no. This is our town hall.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Roy. Yeah.
Okay,
It's interesting being on both. I've been on the capital budget committee for a bit, and representing that committee is one thing, but being on the select board, there were times I was scratching my head.
Don't be bashful.
Okay, come on right up.
No, let's right at the table.
Anywhere you'd like to sit. It's fine.
Have a seat.
Oh, right at the table?
Thanks for coming. Sure, right at the table.
Oh, boy.
You weren't expecting that.
All right.
Good evening.
Hello.
For the record, I'm Ron Miller. I'm the town representative on the library board.
Thank you for your patience.
This is Amanda Merck, who is the executive director of Northern Orange Public Library. I will give a brief financial update and a couple of announcements, and then Amanda has more information about what the library has been doing for the last few months. So first, a couple brief announcements. We are setting our meeting times, the trustees' meetings at a different time next year, and it turns out to be overlapping with the select board. It's going to be the third Tuesday of the month, and it's open to the public.
Do you really need to do that? That's because This is a meeting where we encourage as many people as possible to come, and if you create your board meeting at the same time, you're automatically taking citizens who are involved in the town straight out.
That's a good point.
So
I'll bring that back to the board.
It would be at the same hour?
Well, we start at 5:15 and we're done by 7, but I
We
guess
start at
there's
6.
enough overlap
We
with that.
start at 6, so
Yeah.
definitely would.
All right, I'll bring that back to the board.
Okay.
And the second announcement is that while I had hoped to be your town rep for a long time, the library board has elected me president for the coming year. And we're thinking that it's not a good idea for me to have both roles. So I'm...
See what happens when you volunteer?
Yeah.
You just get in deeper, don't you?
So we will be recruiting more board members and asking them if they would like to apply to be the town representative. And we'll get that to you as soon as we have the people. I'll be sharing the presidency for the first 6 months with Chris Lloyd, so maybe it's not quite as urgent for me to step off here. But by June, I'll be in charge there. So.
Okay, congratulations.
I guess, yeah, thank you. All right, so this is a brief financial update. So to pass out, there's one more. Here's the same numbers that I brought you about 5 months ago. This is our budget for this year. And this is just to refresh your memory on that. Phil, too.
No problem. Here you go.
We should have one copy. I just wanted to say that we're halfway through this fiscal year, and we're on budget. We're doing very well with these numbers, actually a little ahead of ourselves at this point. So things are going well. And I wanted to emphasize again that the town provides 36% of our whole budget. So we are able to run the library finding about 64% of the funds from outside of town money. And we're glad to be able to do that, and we appreciate all that the town does contribute. It's a huge help. If you have any questions about these numbers, we can answer that, but I didn't want to spend a lot more time on this. I wanted to tell you we have one challenge coming up in the next few months. The library building, just like Town Hall, is an old building that needs a lot of maintenance, and we have learned recently that the heating and air conditioning system is crumbling. It's really showing its age, and we're going to need to do a major renovation of the heating and air conditioning system. We do not intend to come to the town for funds for that. We'll raise the money. But I just wanted you to know that that's something else that's going to affect our budget in the coming year.
Just out of curiosity, do you know when that was installed?
Do we know that?
Do you know
1970.
What kind of heat is it?
About 1970 that was put in there, 70, 71.
Wow.
It's done well then.
It's done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you request?
What type of heat is it?
It's
Fuel.
it's an old. It's an old.
Is it oil? Is it steam heat?
It's old steam heat. Yeah. It's oil.
Yeah.
You can't find anybody maintain steam anymore.
Yeah. I don't think that was upgraded in the last renovation. It was
My
not.
understanding is that it was not.
Yeah.
So we will be replacing the whole system and making the building much more energy efficient. We had an audit done fairly recently, and we're going to meet those requirements. So
Yeah, I'll get you one.
Did they recommend a different type of heat, just out of curiosity?
you've been working with the.
We're currently in the process of bringing in experts to take a look at our situation, and we're taking people on walks through the building, and we're really just still assessing the situation. I do know that the kind of popular heating system now, a lot of people, in fact, the courthouse next door is using something called heat pumps.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at here.
Right, so we're also considering that, but we're really at the beginning point of just bringing in experts for that request for proposals.
Yeah.
So we want to have
we are also looking at that same thing here.
Right.
So maybe you could have a discussion with Phil and we could marry these two projects for,
Okay.
you know, for advice
That
for
sounds
your building and our
very
building.
positive.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know,
We
I'd
can
like to
come-
keep my eggs all in one basket if possible.
right,
You know.
okay. All right.
That's all I have, and then Amanda has some other
Okay.
interesting information for you all.
Thank you, Phil.
So, let's see. I have been asked to talk about who is using the library and what kinds of things they're using the library for. So, I wanted to let you know that we currently have approximately 2,500 registered library users. And to make that simple, there are 2,500 people who have library cards, and they come in and they can borrow books or materials. And the lion's share of those people are actually Woodstock residents, but we do have approximately 500 people who are from out of the Woodstock town area, and we do charge them non-resident fees. Which we are in fact looking at increasing our non-resident fees.
You say 500 about?
Approximately, yeah. I think the number that we were able to pull up was a 533. So, we do support Bridgewater. The town of Bridgewater gives us a tax appropriation. We request a certain amount from them. And they've been doing that for the past couple of years. So when people who can present a Bridgewater address, an official Bridgewater address, then our librarians will issue a library card for them, but they will not charge them a fee. Somebody from Pomfret would come in and they would need to pay the out-of-towner fee. We feel that that's very fair for the Woodstock residents. Obviously, you don't pay a fee. It's your town library. Okay, so those are our numbers. So we have very good library attendance. We have a special little, you probably never noticed it when you came in and out of the library, but there's a special little counter on the door. And it counts every time somebody comes in and every time someone comes out. So every month we take the number off of that and we of course cut it in half to get an accurate read for how many visits we've had to the library. And in the past 12 months, we have had 76,060 visits in a month. No, in the past 12 months. 12 months, got it. So over a 12-month period, we had approximately 76,000 people who came in to use the library.
Use the bathrooms a lot.
Some, you're right, Butch, are using our restrooms, and that is part
Good,
of.
and that is good.
It's really part of being in a
service,
tourist location,
sure.
and we have the buses that come up, from all over the place. So, but having said that, a few other interesting numbers. Total circulation of all items, and when I say items, so we have more than just books. We have movies, we have CDs, we have books that are like on a CD so you can listen to it in your car, an audiobook. We also have books that are e-books, so you download it onto your iPad, something like that. And our total circulation of all items, again, over the past 12 months, is 70,855. So people are really using these materials. We have a great reference librarians. They have answered almost 6,000 reference questions. Volunteers, we use a lot of volunteers to help us run the library. We count their hours in our statistics, and we have 2,600 hours for volunteers. And we have had 3,600 people come in. Those are separate usages. Over the past 12 months, 3,600 people have come in to use our public computers that we offer. So that's a pretty big number. And we have been able to offer assistance with computers, so we call it technology tutoring. 355 people have been helped with the technology tutoring. We run all kinds of programs, book discussions. There's a Mahjong group, if people know what Mahjong is.
There's a bridge group that meets once a week. There's a very lively, active knitting club that's been meeting for 3 years. And so we're offering all of these programs. People are using the library. I don't know if anyone has any questions about that, but those are good things. And we have also found that during 2 separate recent, what I would call kind of community, maybe we could say community crises, which I would consider the fire that we had in Woodstock was a community crisis. And then recently the electricity went out for a lot of people for kind of a long time, and that turned into a bit of a community crisis for people as well. And the library, it turns out, the public library can be somewhat of a refuge for people during these difficult times of difficulty. So when the fire occurred in July, if I'm remembering correctly, we reached out to the Vermont Standard and we invited them in to use our space because they were really desperate, looking for a place to continue publishing their weekly paper. I think they've never missed a week since they started publishing, which is pretty remarkable. So our staff helped them get set up. We kind of cleared out a big area for them upstairs, and we cleared out a room downstairs for them, and we just incorporated them into the fabric of the library. And they were just doing their work, and they published 7 papers out of the library. We were actually sad to see them go. They're a real lively bunch, and it's a great weekly paper. During the electrical power outage, we just noticed that the whole library, we're very busy all the time, but the whole library was really much more busy. And we had people plug in all of their devices, and they were charging their phones and whatnot and using our computers or bringing their own computers. So every surface was kind of full of people, and we were glad. We were obviously not an official warming station, but we were, during the day, whenever we were open, we were there for people. I just want to mention a few things about what we're doing for children, because we're doing a lot for children. We currently have a couple of great librarians who serve our youth and children, so teens and children, and of course the parents and families of children as well, and grandparents. So we offer story times, and we're offering story times every day of the week, and we also have several of the nursery schools or preschools in the town of Woodstock bring their children in to the library to do specialized story times for them. So I'm going to forget now, Woodstock Nursery School, and then there's the, in the Congregational Church, the Woodstock Christian Academy, they bring their children in. And our librarians offer programs for them. And the story times, I think sometimes as adults, we're removed from the world of children. We forget that it's not just reading stories to them, they go over the ABCs with them. It's really literacy, teaching them songs, you know, really helping them get ready for school. So we're doing those. I have a librarian who goes out to the Rainbow Nursery School once a week and reads to the kids there. And then we developed all these after-school offerings for children because we have an average of between 20 and 30 children come to the library after school. So if you're ever around the Village Green, you can see it's really quite incredible. It's like the Pied Piper. All these little people are running towards the library from the elementary school. And they come to the library and they stay with us. Sometimes they play outside and we have to kind of monitor that. A lot of times they're inside, especially now where it's so cold. And we found that we didn't want to just leave them completely unstructured. We wanted to offer them some activities. So when the kids have been in school all day, they don't necessarily want something heavy academic. That's already been happening to them all day. But we've created a children's book club, and these are little like 3rd to 5th graders, and they run it themselves. There's about 8 of them, and they have, they choose their own books, and then they do their own little book discussion, and it's really quite something. So we have that one that's just started up. We also have a children's knitting club. Believe it or not, children love knitting, the same as everybody else. And we have a young lady who comes in and teaches the knitting. I know. And then the librarians are also offering crafts with the kids. They do a lot of tutoring. Tutors come in. The librarians are often helping the kids learn how to use the computers. They're helping kids with their homework. There's mentoring. So there are a lot of really positive things going on after school.
Okay, lots happening.
Yes, lots happening. And as Ron said, we're also, hot on the project of making our building more efficient. So we're working on that, and we'll hope to have more news about that at the town meeting in March.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good job.
All right.
Can I just say that in addition to the other community service, I appreciate all the events that you host there. It's
Like the readings?
that's another great venue for things to happen in the community. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. If I could also ask a question, I was interested in statements Alita has made earlier about kind of the changing nature of philanthropy in the town, and I'd be curious whether you keep any records about changes in that over, obviously the library has quite a long history here, but I think it would be interesting to do some analysis. I would even be interested in doing it to see how donating has changed. The size of donations, the number of donations, what those dollars would be today. My feeling is, her feeling, which is that there's been a huge drop-off in charitable giving in the community. And not just among big donors who live in the village, who live in huge houses and seem to have a lot of money, but even maybe just in terms of the smaller, more numerous gifts. And I don't know, I wondered if you had a feeling about whether there has been a change.
Well, we've been able to maintain the amount, I think. We've met our budget on fundraising, but I don't think we've done an analysis of, as you're saying, of a trend, so that would be something to look at.
Yeah, I'm just curious.
We'll hire a Dartmouth student to do that project for us.
Somebody likes
That sounds pretty complex.
One thing we are thinking, our biggest fundraiser is the big gala at the Woodstock Inn, and we're starting to think that may be something whose time is passing, and that we need something that's more open to more of the community and families. So we don't know what that would look like, but that's a sign of a changing demographic.
Tough to replace that kind of income.
Yes, it would be hard to. Yeah,
Rotary found out with a penny sale. Tough to replace that kind of income.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. I just wondered what your thoughts were.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for your patience.
No problem. Thank you.
Very good report, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, where are we?
We're D,
Yeah.
new business D.
Yeah.
C, oh yes.
C.
I said Woodstock
Yeah.
Public, I thought that was
Yeah.
libraries.
We
Yeah,
are
right
on
here.
Woodstock.
Get my copy.
Okay, so where we are now is Woodstock Public Boards, Committees, and Commissions process. Moving right along.
Okay.
Who's going to speak on this, Jill?
I am. So Kerry Cole and I have been working on something to standardize the way that we look at all the different commissions and committees and the different processes that we use for recruitment and attendance and things like that. And every committee seems to be different. So we put together 2 pages on how we might want to not run the boards, because we don't run the boards, but ask the people who join the boards how we might want to recruit for them with the trustees, and then what commitments we might want to ask for from each person that volunteers. So there's a 2-page proposal with suggestions for us to discuss.
So do you want to make this, do you want eventually to formulate an actual policy? Is that the goal?
What would it be? It would just be our common practice. We would adopt a common practice. So would that have to be written as a policy?
So that if I want to be on a board, I know
Right. So the suggestions are really about recruitment. And then what we would ask for people to do, if they're really interested in being on one of the boards, we'd ask them to come to some meetings before the interview, submit a bio to us, come to the meeting. We give them plenty of notice of coming to the select board or the trustee meeting. We interview them when they come to the meeting. We perhaps give them a set of standard questions before they come. Other members of that same committee would be invited to interview them at the same time. And then we would propose that we make a final decision for appointments not at the meeting, but if there are several people doing it, so that the trustees and the select board can discuss something together if they're both involved in joint appointments, or the select board can discuss freely which of the candidates they prefer. And then we suggested that all candidates are notified within 48 hours. And then we would ask every volunteer that commits to attend 80% of the meetings, unless they're extenuating circumstances. And if they're not able to do this, we ask them to resign, so that we can fill a position with people who actually want to be on that board. We'd ask everyone to attend an open meeting law training, so that everyone knows what the laws are that cover the meetings that we have, and then to follow those requirements. We would ask everyone to prepare for the meetings by distributing and digesting any materials before each meeting, to follow the Woodstock conflict of interest policy, and to contribute to work required outside of the regular boards. And then we had a suggestion that the town manager and his assistant record who's on the boards, when they're appointed, all of those details. And then the chairs would be responsible for reviewing the term expirations. We would suggest that reappointments are not automatic, but are made by select board members or trustees in consultation with the existing board. So that if somebody did want to continue, then that would probably be an automatic reappointment. But if the majority of that commission didn't want that person reappointed, they would have the chance to say so. And then we suggested that we actually create some roles and responsibilities for each board, commission and committee, so that we all know what everyone's doing, and that we as the select board and trustees undertake to hold the trainings for the board, commission and committee members on things like open meeting law, and that we create a packet for new members so that they know exactly what they're undertaking when they come to their first meeting. So the trustees have already discussed this and made a couple of changes, and now it's for us to discuss and see if we want to make any changes.
I would just like to, the part of the town manager and his assistant to record the members and the date of appointment and all of that. A letter is sent and the dates of appointment are all included in those letters. But in some of these public boards and commissions, it's important that the communication is with the Planning and Zoning Office, because a lot of those meetings are scheduled by Planning and Zoning. They know if somebody is going to get up. It's on page 2 about the second bullet point. You know, that, yes, Beth needs all of that information for the town and village reports. But also there's a lot of communication between planning and zoning, because of many of these boards, as you know, that's where the source of the meetings are.
But they don't make the appointments.
No, they don't make the appointments.
So this is really, what the suggestion is really about appointments. So the date of appointment, the term length of the position, and the expiration dates is all that's really there. So,
but there needs to be quite a bit of communication. You probably.
I think maybe adding on to the end and saying, and as needed, communicating with planning and zoning of any changes and updates.
Because they'll have that information.
Yes, to make sure that they.
Well, and with the chairs of each committee should be responsible for this.
Ray, did you have a comment?
I did. I don't hear anything about whoever's on these boards being a Woodstock resident or a business manager, or own a business in Woodstock.
Right. There's actually, I'm sorry, there's actually a law about that.
Yeah, right.
Because for some of our boards, you don't have to be a resident. So I think that whole procedure is covered by law, but Phil probably knows.
But it would be good to have that information on the, so when we question people, you know.
Right, we should know that. Okay, I'll add that. I'll find out and add it.
So I think this is a good way to standardize what we do. I think, you know, we had some trouble this year. There were some people who said, who went out for the planning commission, who said they spoke with one board and not the other, and then there were other people who said nobody ever got back to them about whether they had made it on or not. And this could be helpful to sort of make sure we're consistent in the way that we treat people. I mean, of course, all those people who complained took it very personally and assumed that we were personally trying to send a message to them, which is not ever what it is. But the other question I had was, or rather the question I had was, there had been some talk, I think especially with the Planning Commission, about what role the board chairs play in the appointment process. So in other words, do they get to weigh in prior to our making a decision? How do they feel? How, you know, especially when you're talking about reappointing people.
So the suggestion that we made was that they would be at the interview meeting, and they could be at the meeting where we make the final decision.
Where is, oh, I see,
And
there's
how
the
about
last bullet under
reappointment?
that.
They should weigh in
5 up from the bottom of
Got
page 2.
for the
Okay.
reappointment
Oh.
time.
Right.
And
So you consult with them about reappointment.
now, at time of reappointment,
Maybe it's on front too.
there was a period whereby Michael would simply send a note to them, your appointment is about to
Yeah, I guess.
expire. Do you want to, your time on the board is over. Do you want to be reappointed? And then they would have to sign if they did and return it to him.
And on the
Or by
back.
email, of course, we don't sign anything anymore. But they could correspond with Michael if they do or don't want to be.
So
And that was important
So that's
for his board.
Right. So you would ask everybody who was going to be reappointed to affirm that they wanted to be, but then the committee should have or maybe the committee does that before.
Meantime, right.
I mean, if 5 members of the committee don't want a person reappointed, then it shouldn't be automatic.
Right.
Yeah, they were never automatic.
Right.
I mean, you have to walk a fine line. You obviously don't want to discourage people. I mean, the more processes you put up, the more discouraging it is.
We don't have a lot of people coming out of the woodwork.
Right.
with these
No.
committees.
But you do want to treat them consistently,
And
or
we
they
want
do
to make
take it
sure we get the
personally.
right people.
And
Right.
how you end the interview in each or either board, or if they're done together, is very important and should be consistent. Very important to be consistent. You have 3 or 4 people who, we should be so lucky, who are interested, and just to have a neutral at the end seems to be a lot more acceptable than it's handled sometimes, and not always. But
To say that,
everybody
thank you, we'll make a decision in the next few days.
will notify you.
So as this kind of affects my position as well, I updated the EDC's webpage today, and they actually have their grant application on our website. They have, if you're interested in joining the EDC, they have a little blurb about what they do and all that. And they have an application which says to send to me.
And Charlie Kimball put all that together. And
Yes.
It would be great to have something similar. for
I was
each
thinking
board.
that having something similar across all boards where they can get it online, I can say, hey, go here, and it tells them what to do, fill it out, has general information, because I have to say, informing members when they're appointed is sometimes I don't have their address, I don't have an email, I don't have a contact phone number or anything for some of these people. So it's going based on what I have to contact
Well,
them,
Jill, I
so.
think this is a very good start.
And there's a few more things we have to look at.
Yeah,
and
I
find out.
think you need to,
Okay.
yeah.
And I'll talk to
I'm
get
just
that note to
cautious
me.
that we don't make this so that
People don't want to.
people don't want to be here. Right now, I think what's happening when people are coming forward to serve on these different committees is they're being encouraged by somebody to do it, and they
Yes.
don't really know what they're getting into.
Yes.
And they're doing it because somebody asked them to do it. And so I think this is a good start.
So asking them to come to 2 of the meetings beforehand was part of that, so they really
Yeah.
understand what the meeting is
Right.
about.
That is very big. I think
I
that's,
think it's a good start.
I
So,
love that.
I'll make the changes and come back.
Thank you. Great job, though.
all right, so dispatch union.
Okay,
The
so
local
as you know,
contract.
several years ago, the dispatchers joined a union, and it's time to renegotiate a new contract that will take effect on July 1st of 2019. In the past, the board's authorized our attorney, Beth Radigan, to work with me and Robbie to represent the town's interests.
Do you need that approval today?
Just want everybody to know that I'm going to be engaging Beth. It costs money.
It's an annual contract?
3 years.
3 years, good, okay.
And we have that money in the budget?
You have attorney's fees in the budget, but I don't know what's left. We haven't had many expenses this year.
Great.
So prior to, then the contract will have ultimately come to the select board for approval.
Okay. Ambulance rate increase.
Yep.
I thought we just approved.
What you approved was an increase to what we charge member towns to pay us a per capita.
Oh, okay.
This is what we charge to pick a patient up and take that patient to the hospital. It's a charge for taking care of the patient, plus it's a mileage charge.
And what does BLS and ALS stand for?
BLS is basic life support, and ALS is advanced life support.
I mean, this is reflecting increasing healthcare costs,
Well,
period.
It does. Our big loss leader is Medicaid. We don't recoup what it costs us
Sorry about that.
to handle a Medicaid patient. We can live very comfortably on Medicare because they pay at a higher rate. Both Medicaid and Medicare rates are set by the federal government. This affects people with insurance.
So how much higher do we charge these people in Medicare?
Medicare pays what the feds pay. I don't know off the top of my head what. They don't correlate with these. You might get $750 from Medicare. You might get $250 from Medicaid.
We have a high percentage of Medicaid
We do.
patients, don't we?
We do.
Yeah. That's rough.
So this is just keeping up with the times.
Cost of doing business.
It's the cost of doing business. We sent 3 people to paramedic school. It costs money.
So you need a motion to approve these
Yes,
rates?
these need to be approved by the board.
I will make that motion to approve the ambulance rate increases for ALS and BLS services for the upcoming calendar year.
I'll second it.
This,
Motion's been made and seconded to increase the rates. Is there any further discussion?
no, I figured it out.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it.
Thank you.
All right. We are up to contract for services. Okay.
So that is the contract with Leonine Public Affairs. They've been representing the town and village on the heavy truck issue in the legislature during the legislative session. I would say we've been doing it for a solid dozen years since we got bamboozled 1 year without representation. The village has approved it. This is standard form for the past dozen years as far as fee level goes.
And you've been happy with their,
Very, very exceedingly capable.
there weren't they, wasn't there some rep from Rutland threatening to?
There was. That was for last winter and it never materialized. So that's why the fee structure at the bottom of page 1 and going up to page 2 says if there's a credible threat, as in legislation introduced that affects trucks in Woodstock, your fee would go up.
So basically, there's someone there's a rep in Rutland
Who's a truck driver by trade.
Right, and his dream is for trucks to go
That's
through
correct.
Woodstock at 45 miles an
Never
hour.
introduced anything the last
Right.
session.
And those big double wides.
All sizes, all
Yes.
things. And so this is this is the thin piece of paper that
Yeah.
goes between us and them.
Yeah.
So I would make a motion to approve the $4,000 to renew this contract.
Well, is it
No, it's
2,500?
Sorry, I
So
looked
the
at one
village
number on
pays
the back.
half, the
Got it.
town pays half.
got it.
It costs each side about 5,000 a session,
2,500
a month,
a month.
of which the town's responsible for half.
Got it.
And then if there's something really
Something comes
Sorry,
up.
something
scary,
on the back.
it goes to 4.
Right. That's the contingency amount.
I'll second that
Motion's
motion.
been made and seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. All right, now we're on to permits. The parade permit for the Covered Bridge Half Marathon, which is in our packet.
Yes.
And it is for Sunday, June the 2nd. Don't leave now, it's just getting interesting.
Good night. So I propose a motion to accept this application.
Motion's
Always
been
approved
made.
this before, haven't we?
Yeah.
Yes, it's the same
every
route.
year.
Did you second?
Same route.
Motion's been made.
Yeah, I'll make a motion, we approve it.
It's been made, you second it?
Yeah, I'll
Okay.
second it.
Okay, you made the motion, right?
Yes.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve this for,
Jill.
or Jill did?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I'm making it in my mind. All right, let's go back.
All right.
The loan specifications,
Oh, it should.
ambulance and fire truck loan specs, number F.
Yep.
What I'd like to do is shop the loan for the fire truck locally with the local banks. Think I'll do better than the lease. And Jill was saying the other day that it doesn't do you any good from a financial aspect to go to a lease. They count against your total debt, the same as a loan.
No, they don't.
I think
That's what you were saying last week.
Sonia.
No, they don't count against your debt, but I thought the whole
Sorry.
problem was that you can't get a loan for that length of time without.
5 years is no problem.
5 years is no
So
problem.
is 5 years the maximum that we could go to? Because the length of a fire engine is much, the life of a fire engine is
If you
much
wanted
longer.
to borrow for a fire truck over a longer period of time, you would have to go through a bond
Okay.
procedure. Doesn't mean you have to borrow from the bond bank.
Right.
But if you go through a bond procedure where the voters vote to incur long-term debt.
And anything over 5 years is considered long-term?
That's when you have to do this, like a special town. You have a.
Yeah, vote of the town.
Yeah.
One way or another. So I'll bring those numbers next month.
Anything further? Before we move on to Board of Sewer Commissioners?
I did have one further one. So the ambulance, should that be over 5 years rather than 3? Or are you just getting competition with the lease as step 1?
Because we replace ambulances every 3 years, I would look to borrow for 3 years, but we don't know what we're buying right now. So I'm not going to go to market for an ambulance. But it would seem to make sense to get it paid off before you move on to your next ambulance.
Right, so you have that flat payment.
That's why I went with 3.
Is that?
Yeah.
Okay. Sewer rate sheet.
Yep. So it's just simple math. That we do keep track of the number of cubic feet of water that runs across everybody's meter in the whole town, and it gets accumulated, whether you're on a meter or not. We have a way of tracking you. One is by an engineer's assessment of what you use. So we have a cubic feet, and you have your budget of $817,000 is your money needed, and that's your $922 per cubic foot.
What's it up from? Do we know?
I had that, but I don't. It's not up much, about $20 for a single person.
Oh, okay.
So I had a question about
Yes.
the timing of this. Are we setting it in arrears?
You set it in the middle of the year. We budget it in the middle of the year. This
Based on the usage for the 12 months to...
prior to the end of June 30th.
Because that's when people pay, they pay.
So this is the rate that will apply from July 1, 2019?
Yes. So this is what, when you get a sewer bill next month at your home, it'll cover the period operating expenses from July 1st to June 30th. So you're paying right in the middle of the year.
And it will be this rate?
Yes.
Yes.
So do we do this twice a year?
Once a year.
Always December? Always the middle of the year?
Yeah, that's January.
Usually due in March.
Due in March.
So you've used half your water?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, there it is.
It was really tough when it was due a couple weeks after the tax bill. Just as you're approaching Thanksgiving, papers get lost. So it was extended till the new year.
So this is the usage for what period?
July, the preceding year.
July 1, 2018.
July 1, 2017 to June 30th, 2018.
Oh, okay.
The entire preceding, you got all your
So-
readings from the aqueduct company.
Why do you use data that's already 6 months out of date? Why not just use data to December?
Because we cannot, most of our data comes from Woodstock Aqueduct Company.
To get their water meters.
And for a period of a quarter, they have somebody out reading a meter. So they don't read everybody on the same day.
Right.
So my data is going to be 3 months old minimum.
Thank you.
It's not electronic. It doesn't all feed back to head office and have
It's
something.
not like your.
But it works to balance the budget.
This works for us. And it's as kind as we can be to our residents as far as spreading out the tax bill and the sewer bill.
Okay.
So what do you need from us?
Approve this rate sheet.
Okay. We need to approve this rate sheet.
So I'll suggest a motion to approve the rate sheet as suggested here.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve this rate sheet. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it.
So the next thing on this Board of Sewer Commissioners is one of our property owners does not have an apartment in this house and was sent a sewer bill for an apartment. Nobody's living there. So I asked that that be abated.
Is there something I'm not saying this pertains to whether or not we'll approve this or not,
Yes.
but just out of curiosity, is there something someone needs to do if they reconvert their, if they take an apartment out of their house? Like,
Eventually, most people come to the zoning office.
okay.
And we get information that way.
Or you could get it this way, I suppose.
So how did we think he had an apartment?
He had his mom living with him until about 10 years ago.
Okay,
The
yeah,
lister
I've seen
card
that in
said
the letter,
something
yeah.
about an apartment.
But nobody's living there now? Okay.
So do you want a motion for this one?
Yes.
So I propose a motion to forgive the additional sewer bill sent to Owen Schindler for the apartment which wasn't used.
The $499.50, is that? This is
Well,
London.
just at a two-person rate for 2017.
Oh,
Yes.
that's what we're approving.
That's what you're
Yes.
approving. I
Okay, so
don't
we're
know.
waiving the one-person rate.
See, this was the
You're
7,500.
You're waiving that right to one person.
The one person.
And going down to the deuce.
Right.
See, this is 7,500.
So this is-
And this is 5,000, that's a fee for two.
Yes, that's correct.
I have a motion on the floor.
I'll second.
Motion's been made and seconded that we waive that fee for Owen Schindler. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it.
Thank you. This is way.
Has he been receiving these for 10 years?
No, this is only happened last year.
And the next one
Got rid of
is,
Lister card.
Oh,
the next one is for the Woodstock Resort for the cooling tower. Tell us what that.
Okay, so if you run air conditioning, it uses water. And so that was a self-read meter to monitor the amount of water that was used. This meter broke down. And so the proposal is to use from the meter reading from the prior year, from 2017. It doesn't go into your system.
We've done that.
It evaporates. It's
Right.
right.
Doesn't, yeah. It's not part of your.
So they've always not paid on what evaporates.
Yeah.
And we can't, they're unable to tell us how much evaporates because the meter broke, and recommend using the last full year of a known reading of evaporation.
And do you agree with that recommendation?
That's a good number. That's a fair number, yes. We do it at the hockey rink even, does it.
So I'll propose a motion that we use the
Well, we
2007.
can prove it any other way, you see.
Correct.
Motion on the floor.
To approve using the suggested, the motion is to approve the use of the 2017 meter usage for billing the 2018 year for the Woodstock Resort.
Motion's been made, seconded. Seconded.
yeah, I'll second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. All right. Any other business?
No, sir.
All of our citizens have left.
Right.
Except for Ray.
Other business, we
Ray's still
scheduled
here,
some
Ray's
budget
still
meetings.
here.
Make a
May's
comment,
still
the
here.
citizens comment?
Scheduled
Yeah,
budget meetings.
yeah, we got to schedule our budget meetings, the budget book's in. So we're on a bit of a time frame here. I'll be out from the January 20th, and Jill is going to be away some. So we'd like to get started
Next Thursday and Friday,
next
27
Thursday
and
and
28.
Friday. Okay?
Yep.
Then come back Monday and Tuesday, like January 6th and 7 maybe, or 7 and 8. I don't have my calendar.
6 and 7 is what
Monday
you
and
said.
Tuesday,
Six is-
7.
You got that?
Six is on a Sunday, so
Oh,
7 and 8
Saturday.
would be
7 and
Monday and
8,
Tuesday.
January 7 and 8.
So nothing on the week of the
New Year's.
Correct.
Well, why wouldn't we do anything that week?
Well, you're more than welcome to. I won't be available.
Oh, right.
Okay, so, and then we'll decide from the 8th where we go from there.
You should be in good shape on the 8th, and you, like Jill said, she's available by phone.
Yes.
Like you say, you want to get it.
Yes, that's.
You're not going to have a whole lot of questions after that.
Okay.
Yes, that.
I can do the morning of the 27th. I can't do the afternoon. That's my only.
Yeah, is mornings good for everybody? On the 27th, 28th, 7th, and 8th?
The 27th is a Thursday?
Yep.
Yeah.
The 27th and 28th are, the 7th isn't. If we could do
Isn't good for
Could we do
morning?
an evening or afternoon on that date?
I can't
On
do
the
afternoon.
7th.
Okay.
On the 28th, I could.
So let's deal with the 27th, 28th. Morning
Morning's
good?
great.
8 o'clock, or 8:15.
Thank you.
8:15, because that gives them a chance to get the computers going here at the office.
Which day?
Only way I won't get here is if the
Thursday.
26th
Yeah,
is
the
bad
7th and the
weather.
8th,
Oh, okay, both days.
both days,
I'm
8:15.
sorry, I can't do the 28th.
Can't do it at all.
I can't do the morning. I can do any other time that day.
How late in the morning?
No time in the morning. I'd be back by noon.
So 1 o'clock, or
Yeah.
what do you want to do?
One's fine.
1 o'clock on the 28th.
Okay, great. Thank
January
you.
28th, 1.
1,
January 27th, 8:15.
okay.
If I can't drive back on the 26th due to bad weather, I'll let you know.
Okay.
And phone.
So now we have, can we just, January 7th and 8th, you want to wait and pick
Sure.
times for that when we meet on the
That's a good idea.
Fine.
Yeah.
27th,
A
28th?
little closer.
Yeah.
Good.
Works for me.
Thank you.
I guess.
All right, we
need
have
approval of the
minutes.
minutes.
Other business.
We have a lot
I
of
got a little of
minutes.
it.
Okay, John?
What do you got, John?
John's got a little other business.
I have just a little other kudos to the highway department. There was a bad pile of snow on the intersection of Route 4 off on the Cox District Road. And I mentioned it to them, and they took care of it on
good.
both ends. Tell them thank you.
I will.
The other business that I have is that every year we dedicate the town report to somebody or something.
Yep.
And I had a little discussion with Phil about who we dedicate the town report to this year. We haven't had anybody retire or die or whatever. So I had a suggestion that I'd like to run by you, is that we take all of the emergency service people and get a group photo, and I have somebody that will do this, a group photo of them. They would be in the foreground, and then in the background would be the blazing fire on Central Street that morning. So it would be, and we'll dedicate to Woodstock Emergency Services. And David is, if I get the approval to do that, is working on getting them all together. To those that can't make it, well, just can't make it. But so I think it'd be a nice touch. Cool.
Yep. Yeah,
all right, good.
And they'll have their uniforms or whatever they have that will be.
Whatever the chief can put together.
Okay. I don't know if
They
this
own
back
Class
yet.
A's if they choose to wear or not, it's up to them.
David, I think desires that they do, but you know.
No problem.
Yeah.
I'm only kidding.
Select board meeting minutes of the November 20th and the November 21st with a joint meeting.
I had one change to suggest on the minutes of the December 7th meeting.
On the what?
December 7th.
December 7th.
Oh, yeah, there is another one, isn't there? Yep.
On 3B, 1, line 70, I suggest that we use the words that were used in the EDC meeting notes to actually say what it is they plan to put at the bottom of every contract. And I gave those words to Beth. It's something like, it's just making a bit more specific what we have here.
Mm-hmm.
So she has those words?
Yes.
She has those words.
I will make the change.
And I had a change which I can send down to you on the November 21st meeting. It's on page 2, line 70 also. We formed a joint committee to look into the employee policy, not the benefits package and policies. So I can give you that. But it's just more specific.
What did you say? Did you say employee benefits?
No, I said employee policies.
Employee
personnel policies.
Personnel
Do you want me to, I can give you this if you want to look at it.
That's fine.
Okay.
Got it now.
Thanks.
Anything else?
Nope.
So we need approval for
Make a motion to approve
7/21
the
and
minutes for November 20th, November 21st, and December 7th.
do I hear a second?
Second that.
Motion's been made and seconded to approve the minutes. 21, 20, 21, and 7. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
I move I make a motion to adjourn the meeting following review and approval of expense warrants.
I will second that.
Motion's been made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Merry Christmas, everybody.
Merry Christmas, Butch. Macy, Merry Christmas. Thank you.
All of you.
And also select board
Everybody
friends.
who's watching,